welcome to another episode of the Purpose Vision Future Show. My name is Amanda Heal and I'm coming to you from Canberra, Australia. Did you know that loneliness is a mindset? You may not think so, but at the end of this presentation, I think you might understand a bit more about what I'm talking about. And the reason I want to talk about overcoming loneliness today is that discovering your purpose or going on the journey of discovering your purpose can be a lonely one because not everyone understands what you're doing. And people, particularly people that you love, may even try and discourage you from doing this because they want to protect you from taking risks. They want to protect you from stepping out of your comfort zone. And sometimes that's what you need to do when you're discovering your purpose, life purpose, or living it out. So I just wanted to give you some tools if you are on this journey or you do go on this journey and you start feeling lonely. I want to give you some tools to help overcome that. And also it's a relevant topic today, particularly with COVID and lockdowns and going into self-isolation and such. But loneliness didn't magically appear with COVID. It's been something that's been around for a long time. Did you know, and I didn't know this until I did some research, that the extent to which a person suffers from loneliness can be inherited? So by that I mean that a lonely child can often grow up to be a lonely adult. And loneliness is a feeling of sadness or distress that comes about from being by yourself, or the feeling of disconnectedness from the world. Putting it another way, loneliness is that negative feeling that arises when our social needs aren't being adequately met by the quality or quantity of our social relationships. Like, you can feel alone in a crowd. I remember at times when I was studying law, or commerce actually, I used to go into a lecture theatre and there'd be 500 students there. And I'd be sitting in the middle of the front row because I used to record the lectures on a cassette recorder, if anyone still remembers those. And so I used to sit in the front row in the middle where there was a PowerPoint and I could plug the cassette recorder in. And I didn't have any friends because I used to go to lectures and then I'd go home and then I'd study, and then I'd go to lectures and go home and study. So I never really made any friends for the first couple of years of university. And so when I was sitting in this lecture theatre with 500 other people, I'd actually feel really lonely because I didn't have those social connections that I wanted to have. There haven't been any major studies on the long-term effects of loneliness in Australia, but the Black Dog Institute has suggested that 1 in 4 adults suffer from loneliness. And a 2018 national survey in the US suggested that 45% or more of adults suffer from loneliness. And another study done in the UK suggested it was 1/3 of people who suffered from loneliness. And it's not just humans that suffer from loneliness either. I remember reading a newspaper article last year that was talking about when COVID hit and all the zoos shut, the animals were still turning up to the fronts of their cages at normal exhibition times. And the keepers had to start going and having lunch with them to keep them company because they were missing the public. So what can we do about loneliness? Well, I was one of those lonely children that I mentioned. Because I was an only child, and even though I had loving and attentive parents, I didn't have siblings, and I went to school not to my local school. So, I mean, it was still within Canberra, but it wasn't walking distance away. So I didn't have friends that could easily come over and visit. And so I did end up feeling very lonely as a child. But thankfully, I've found these tips that I'm going to share with you in a minute, which has helped me not be a lonely adult. Also, when I left my legal job and started running my own business, I found that very lonely as well, because I wasn't working in an office. I didn't have people around me anymore. As I said before, people didn't really understand what I was doing. My first business was actually selling skincare products through the network marketing company that I talked about in the last episode. I ended up starting a skincare business, and a lot of my friends and family disagreed with what I was doing, and they felt that I should have continued in my legal career. So that was a very lonely time for me. But during that time, I discovered some skills that I thought that actually helped me overcome my loneliness. And the first one is talking regularly to friends and family, even if they don't really necessarily understand what you're doing. Talking regularly to friends and family, or to people who do understand what you're doing. Find a community that is doing what you're doing. Perhaps find other people who are on that life purpose journey, or entrepreneurs, or people like that, and connect with them. And I'm not just talking about liking posts on Facebook or Instagram. I'm talking about having real conversations, getting together physically with people if you can, or on FaceTime or on Zoom, or because I know for you sighted people, seeing people's faces is often important for you. So yes, I know when I was came back from Vietnam from a holiday last year, when COVID hit, I was feeling very lonely because I was in self-isolation, and calling my friends and family, I started doing that much more often than I had before, and it really helped sort of overcome that loneliness. I remember when I was studying overseas, one thing I absolutely loved was, this was in the 80s, before mobile phones, and phone calls were very, very expensive back then because I was in England. And my family used to make cassette tapes. Showing my age now. My family used to make cassette tapes, and they would send them to me. And it was so good because I'd just hear, my mum used to make tapes while she was doing the ironing. So, I'd hear her talking, and I'd hear the Australian birds in the background, and it just transported me back to that place. I could imagine myself sitting in the kitchen. And I remember there was a TV episode. There was a show that I used to watch called Neighbours. I realized that she was also cooking dinner, and she was cooking steak. And oh my gosh, steak in England used to be like super expensive. And so I could never afford steak. So I ate a lot of mince and sausages and things like that. And I really missed a good piece of steak. And it turned out that I ended up being more interested in the sound of the cooking and them eating the steak. I was literally sitting there drooling all through this episode. So those tapes really did take me back to being in Australia, and really took that loneliness away. So before we go on to the next tip, I think it might be a good time to take a break. So don't go away, and I will see you on the other side.
Mr. Happy Living here. I love good things made for good people. That's why I love Happy Living's online e-course. It's an 8-week long deep dive into you and the inspired life you want to live. the life you were put here on this earth to live, the one that you and only you can live. 8 weeks of lectures and ideas and topics and supporting materials and powerful self-improvement tools, all designed for you, all designed to help you create the tools and the power and the confidence you need to discover your purpose and to discover the life you were meant to live, and to feel incredibly inspired and motivated to decide you will live your life to its fullest. It's all designed to help you create the unique and distinct philosophy of you and your inspired life. Go to happyliving.com, select our e-course, and save $100 with promo code WYTV7. And for every enrollment, I'll donate another $100 to WYTV7. For $300 and about 30 hours, I promise you'll never, ever be the same again.
Welcome back, and thank you to our lovely sponsors who make this broadcast and other broadcasts possible. And if you would like to donate, please do so, because your donation makes this broadcast and the other lovely shows that they have on this channel possible. And you can do that by going to WYTV7.org. Now, we were talking before the break about loneliness and how loneliness can be a mindset. And I was offering tips about how to overcome loneliness. And the first tip I was talking about was talking to your friends and family, or a community that you can relate to. Now, tip number 2 is surround yourself with sound. Many times when I felt lonely, I found that having some sort of sound helps. Sometimes I will listen to an audiobook, or even just put the TV on in the house. What can happen when you get lonely is the negative thoughts start, the negative self-talk starts. You know, the poor little me, I'm all alone. And I remember particularly when I first left my legal job, you know, I used to think, oh, you know, there's no one to talk to. My business isn't going very well. I don't have too many friends. I don't go out as much as I used to. And I just used to spiral and get worse and worse and worse, until I'd be in tears and really wondering, you know, what I could do. But if you can focus those thoughts on something else and crowd them out, that really helps. And so again, I would bury myself in a book, in an audio book, in a fantasy book, because that would just completely remove me from those thoughts. And another wonderful way to crowd out those thoughts is to work on discovering your life's purpose. Look at some of those questions that we've talked about. Because if you start to discover your life's purpose, you're living out, or you're doing what makes you feel passionate. And so when you're doing something that you're passionate about, your thoughts don't have a chance to go off on adventures of their own. So, and the next tip I have is to get a pet. Pets are the most wonderful ways of overcoming loneliness. And, you know, I know that some of you might live in apartments where you're not allowed to have, you know, a dog or a cat, you know, even fish. You can get fish, or perhaps a bird. I mean, I've got both a dog and a bird, and they are a sense of constant joy to me. She's being very quiet at the moment, but my beautiful guide dog, Sadie, I mean, she's not strictly a pet, she's a guide dog, but when she's not working as a guide dog, or a seeing eye dog, as some of you call it, she's a pet. So I can hear her. She's lying behind me on her bed, and she's just breathing. So I can hear her breathing in the background. So she's a constant presence to me. And if I had the door open, you would be able to hear my bird, Maestro. I have a beautiful budgie called Maestro, and she sings and she cheeps and she chirps. And when I go out into the kitchen when I'm not working, she comes and she lands on my shoulder, on my head. And so having a pet is the most wonderful way to overcome loneliness. And they're also wonderful keepers of secrets. You can tell them just about anything, and they'll never tell on you. They'll never reveal your secrets. So you can share with them your greatest fears and your wildest dreams, and they'll listen attentively, and they're just wonderful. And finally, another tip, my final tip of overcoming loneliness is practicing your faith, if you have one. And researchers have shown that spiritual beliefs and practices can be a very effective way of combating loneliness. So I'm getting better now at practicing the presence of God. I'm not perfect at all at it, but I'm getting so much better at it. And rather than being a distant being, up there somewhere, he's someone I can reach out to and even have conversations with sometimes. They're not necessarily in real-time conversations. It sometimes takes a while to answer my questions, but, I just put on some worship music and start singing and worshiping him. And I really can feel his presence and listen to him. And it's just a wonderful way of overcoming loneliness. So I want to encourage you, don't stay lonely. Do something about it today. I have combated my loneliness and overcome it, and I know you can too. So thank you for listening or watching, I should say. I've been doing podcasts for years, so I'm used to using the word listening. But thank you for watching, and I hope this content has been helpful for you, or will be helpful for you on your journey to discovering your life's purpose. And as always, if you are facing anything which seems just a bit too hard or a bit overwhelming, you've got this. Just dig down deep inside and grab that courage that I know you have and pull it out. And I promise you, you will be just fine. Thank you.